Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Davis and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture brought to you by my sponsor, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. Printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant code calculator, lets you get as many codes as you want for free, to their 24-hour customer service. Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns, and a bunch of them have actually been on this very show, and they say amazing things about Mixum. I got a bunch of products and Kickstarters that were printed using Mixum, and those products are phenomenal. And right now they offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And they're actually running a promotion right now for the listeners of my show where you can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get 5% discount off your first order. And I know, and I'm sure you guys can attest to it, that every percentage point matters when you're funding and you're barely meeting your goal, or you just crossed your goal, or maybe you did $1,000 over your goal. 5% makes a huge difference. So that is Mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab to get 5% discount on your first order. And so without further ado, I have the comic creative team of Matt, Summo, and Peter Collins. So welcome to the show.
What's up,
Thanks
man?
for having us.
Yeah, no, I am very excited. And I know that you guys have 5 days left on I think your very first Kickstarter that you two are running together called the Bardic Verse. So before we get too far into the Kickstarter and start breaking down this story, what is the basic premise of the comic?
I'm sure it's the Bardic Verses, and it's essentially about a bard trying to escape the shadow of his warrior family legacy. He comes from a long line of warriors. His dad was a warrior, his grandfather was a warrior. They were all famous, all very prolific. And he decided not to pick up a sword and decided to pick up a lute instead. So we kind of just deal with him being sort of the NPC in different adventures. He starts the story in a tavern, playing songs, telling stories, and we illustrate. Pete illustrates all those stories in the book in different art styles to show the different adventures that he goes on, and then we find out there's actually a reason why he's at that specific tavern, and then we go from there.
Yeah, so where did the idea for this story come about? Because right now, bards are very, very hot. I don't know how much you know about me, but I have a friend, Santine Phoenix, and she just basically wrote an entire D&D game that deals with being bards that did over $300,000 on Kickstarter. And so
Really?
this is something that is becoming bigger, and it's a very interesting world, and I guess people are getting sick of goblins and elves, for lack of a better word. So, not to say that goblins and elves aren't fun, but it is something that is very much where people are now venturing outside and going into bars. So where did that idea for this come about? Because this is something that's very different. It's obviously more D&D like, and is also sort of, I guess, highlighting, I guess, the bridesmaid versus the bride a little bit in that realm.
That's a good comparison, actually. That's a really good comparison. So the idea was Matt's. He came up with this idea. It was around the time that The Witcher was out, and of course, the Bard in The Witcher is awesome, right? Like he's fantastic, and I think we were all probably humming that song for 6, 7, 8 months after that show was over. And he and I got to talking about how this particular character. I kind of went in the D&D direction. I played Dungeons and Dragons for years, and we just kind of started talking about how bards are underappreciated. Oftentimes they're either the butt of jokes or they're there as that backup NPC like character. In Dungeons and Dragons terms, everybody wants to play the kick-ass warrior or the wizard that's raining down hellfire or whatever. And a bard, their entire purpose is to tell a story within a game that's designed to tell a story. So to play a bard, you have to be challenged. You have to bring out that charisma that you're supposed to exude as a bard, right? And then we just kind of got rolling with that. It was Matt's idea to do to have the story kind of focus on like a set list with different songs and to have them be in different art styles.
Yeah, and it even goes further into this because it's not just that Martin is a bard. Obviously, he comes from an entire family that were warriors, and he is sort of the exact opposite. And now his entire last name is Swordhand. I mean, when you have a last name like Swordhand, it's kind of hard not to pick up a sword and go, slay enemies and go kill things.
Right.
And
Right.
obviously, as you stated, bards obviously tell a story. They're more musical. They tend to be more magical to some degree. And they also tend to, I guess, if you're going to play a bard, you're more of a support character. And
Yep.
it's this idea that what was that like really building Martin out and even building out his father's legacy and throwing that out there, because we get those stories all the time in comics where you're going against what technically your family's destiny is supposed to be, or your family's legacy is, but we never really see it from being a bard's position and having it sort of done in an obvious way, but not so obvious way to some degree.
Yeah, so again, like he's a storyteller, right? So we start the book by him telling um, the story of his father, of his family, and then kind of the way he sees the events of his childhood. So he sees the last time he sees his father, his parents have a fight and his dad leaves. So he attributes that fight, whether he's right or wrong, we don't know, but he attributes that fight to his father being upset that he didn't decide to follow in the family in the name and become a bard instead. We find out that there was a little bit more to that later on in the book, but eventually, like, it's essentially just, it's exactly like you said, like it's that story that we've seen before, but just told with a different lens. And he really, honestly, like that, the I hate to say this, but the ghost of his father kind of follows him around through the whole book. You know what I mean? Like we start the book for some he gets punched in the face because somebody's like, "Oh, you're a sword hand. Like you should be really good at combat, but you're not. Like you're you're the black sheep of the family. Like how dare you take that name and not follow in those footsteps?" Um, so yeah, it's just him again. It's just dealing with that, right? He goes the whole story. People just refer to him as Bard sometimes, like they don't even call him by his name. There's one character who Pete and I have grown to love, named Gary, this little yellow goblin. He gets his name wrong consistently, like 3 times he calls him the wrong name. Yeah, there he is.
There he is. Look at that guy.
He's
Look
the
at him.
best. Yeah, he calls him the wrong name constantly when we first meet him. And even later on in the story, he calls him the wrong name. So it's just, again, it's just telling that story with using a different character, as opposed to like you're a superhero, you're son of a superhero or daughter of a superhero who doesn't want to follow in their parents' footsteps. This is just a guy, essentially just a musician, not following his father's footsteps and dealing with the repercussions of not doing that.
Yeah, and it gets very interesting because obviously we are in a fantasy world where anything could happen. Within reason, I'll say that. I don't think we're going to get a gigantic robot coming into this world per se, but
Not yet.
there's magic and a variety of other things, and there's horseback riding and all sorts of fun stuff, and there's some probably mythical creatures. I think it's a fair assumption in all of this, and he sort of joins up, I guess, with a party, and now they're thrown into a variety of problems and figuring out stuff, and even building him out where he is using wit and he's using his musical talents and things that a bard would use to solve those problems, but not in a combat way. And what was that like? Because typically, if you have a party of bards and you're playing D&D, maybe one of them has a sword, but you're going to be taking out a dragon with a lute, or be playing a song, or it's the scene in Harry Potter. I was just watching, I think it's the Sorcerer's Stone, where Fluffy gets knocked out with the harp. That's probably more likely how a problem's going to be solved with a bard versus, with a sword. And so what was that like, really staying true to the bard, but also keeping it intellectual? Because it is a tricky balance to make that happen and make that work.
It's a great question. It's a great question. From the art side, I thought it was important to portray Martin with some visible weakness, and rather than making him look kind of physically weak, I just kept him very average, and I tried to accentuate like characteristics on his face, right? Matt's story kind of like directs Martin through like a series of events, right? Like those events by and large are moved along by him fumbling his way through something or being there to help somebody else with something. It's he's not what's the word I'm looking for? He's not the hero of his own story, right? Like he's there to be in somebody else's background. And when action comes up, he's not really the one that's involved. I mean, he is, but he's also not, right? Like he's not going up to guys and punching them in the face. He's not drawing weapons and engaging in combat. He's more likely to grab somebody's hand and do the tango. He serves as a wonderful distraction. So the action is there. Sometimes it's in the backdrop. Sometimes it's right in your face. And Martin's in the backdrop. So it's like we kind of ping pong it a little bit. He's still the main character without a doubt, but he's not the hero.
And even to go further into
Theory.
that, because one of the things that I like about this and what I've read of it, because obviously I got a preview copy, is that he is average looking, and it's kind of a nice stigma to some degree. I don't know if it just sort of came about or if it logically made sense, but I'm sure you've read stories where we have a weak character and they're physically weak, and they're also, I guess, mental weak, for lack of a better word here. And in this, obviously, the main character, he's weak in a lot of ways, but he just looks like a normal person in the world. And I don't know if that was intentional or it just wrote itself, or you're just like, this makes sense because it just does, because there's a lot of people who are like this character and like this individual who look average, but they have defects. I mean, you could go in society and that's how society is reflected in a lot of ways right now.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Yeah.
definitely a conscious choice to make him just the regular guy. Like, and I think to your point, like, I don't like when they do that with characters where it's like, oh, you could clearly tell like this is the weak guy, like this isn't the cool guy, like, because he looks like frail or like, meek. Like, we just wanted, like, Martin is he's very smart, he's very charismatic, like, but again, like, he's not doing the punching, he's not swinging swords, like he plays music and tells stories. So like, we just wanted him to be a regular guy that is unassuming, because people, again, like, people don't assume anything out of him because they see him carrying a lute and they're like, oh, here's the bard, like this guy who's basically useless. But we also take we take great pains to show that, like, he's not useless. Like, he's creative at solving the problems that he gets into. But again, he's not, we'll see, like, the majority of the characters that he is in a party with, like, doing all the heavy lifting, but he's like doing other stuff in the background. Like, he's not useless. He's just not the guy, again, he's not in combat, but he's doing other stuff that's incredibly useful.
To put it in like Dungeons and Dragons statistics terminology, he's got high charisma, he's got moderate intelligence, and maybe slightly under average wisdom. So it's like, he's smarter than he is wise, and he's lucky in a lot of ways, and can kind of, get himself out of things with, just some charismatic moves.
Yeah, and it's very interesting on how he does things, and also how he solves certain problems and how he deals with certain things, and sort of things just happen to him where he is doing a lot of the stuff behind the scenes. And one of my favorite quotes is that if you make the right moves behind the scenes, you will be found. and you will be introduced to the right people, and things will sort of be done for you, and that you will be found and connected. And it's a great quote. And obviously, I'm paraphrasing
Yeah.
the quote from a PPD. He was just explaining that quote, and really interesting thing. And one of the things that I really like about this book also is that it has somewhat of an anthology feel to it as well, because he's in a tavern, and at least the way I read it, and correct me if I'm wrong, and hopefully I'm not going to influence anybody's reading of it, and I'll just say I'm sorry in advance if I ruin the book for everybody out there, but it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he's retelling a lot of his adventures, and he's sort of the entertainment, because I'm assuming in this world they don't have a television, and so people are at the tavern and they want to hear these adventures, and he's telling it very much in what's probably a musical entertainment sector, yet it's also chronological. And so what was that like? Because it's now self-contained, and we still get the, I guess, nail-biting component of it, saying how is he going to get out of this situation? How is he going to get involved in this situation? What is he going to do? But we also know that he's going to get out of it to some degree, and it's a very interesting way how to frame a story.
Yeah, it is. Word guy.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
Pete and I like to do like a back and forth, so I was like, oh, I just spoke, so Pete will go.
yeah.
So I will take this one. So yeah, it is, you were dead on. It's anthology style where, like, yes, he's telling these stories. The stories are designed to stand on their own, but they don't have to, because it is actually one series of, like, these are journeys in sequence, right? So again, we're starting the book where that series of journeys ends. So again, like, we start the book in this tavern and we find out across these journeys, like, why he's there. But again, they all do stand alone, and it was easy to contain them. So I have a lot of experience doing anthologies. I've done a couple of pieces for a couple of different anthologies. One pro wrestling anthology, two horror anthologies, and it's very easy, I would say, to write a self-contained story. But in the most recent one, I worked on, called Deadbeats from a Wave Blue World, all of the stories were self-contained, but the framing device for it was a music shop that sells, like, haunted and cursed items. So I was really interested in, like, they had the owner of the music shop, like, going through the music shop, and, like, they would pick up a CD, and then that CD would, like, be the next story in the book. Or they would pick up, this is a cheap plug for my story, they would pick up a saxophone, and then the saxophone would be the next story in the book. So I was just really interested in, like, that sort of like Twilight Zone-y sort of way of telling stories. Like, you have that central figure telling a story, and then it spins off to, the story proper. But again, we wanted to use the different art styles to visualize different styles of music. They're not all musical, and I say all of them. Only one of them is technically musical. We did a story called Fear and Loathing in Wonderville. That's kind of a riff on Disney. Pete drew it all in Disney style, and we there's a full-on musical number in the middle of it, which is the most challenging thing I've ever written in my entire life.
So we're going to get into the art style and all the stuff that's out there, but I actually am curious, because I've had this debate, and we might get slightly controversial, but there is where people call things that I don't think are anthologies, and people also call things that should be anthologies, not anthologies. And I don't know what the definition of an anthology is, because if everything is sort of a vignette, but it leads into a bigger world, I don't know if that's an anthology if you're going 16 pages at a time, and then you're spacing it out 400 years into the future, and then you space out another 200 years, and it gets tricky. And even, I don't know if you guys know Travis Gibb, but Cthulhu Invades Oz, he said it's an anthology, but it is a story about Cthulhu invading Oz, and we're dealing with different vignettes of different people like Scarecrow and Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Lion all dealing with it. And I don't know if that's an anthology either, because it has such a central tie that we're getting a 360 view of the war. And you could make it a 720 view. You could add however many
Sure.
you want to it. But at a certain point, I don't know exactly what an anthology is, because when you start having things that give that 360 view of something or 180 view of something, I don't know if that's an anthology. And I'm super curious about that, because it could be that maybe I just view it slightly different and it doesn't change the work itself. But I think that term has been overused tremendously. And I don't know what an anthology is anymore, because it seems to me that I find, because people say Alice in Wonderland is not an anthology, but you can make the argument that it is, and it gets very tricky with all that stuff. So I'm curious how you guys feel about what classifies an anthology versus what is sort of a 360 view story.
It's a very
I
good
guess,
question.
yeah, I mean, my definition of it is a collection of stories, right? I don't think it necessarily matters that, you know, there might be like one central figure that's involved. I think if it's a different story, like a different story by, you know, a different creative team, or in this case, in our case, it's Pete and I, but Pete's drawing these stories in a different style. They're all like homages to different things. Like, I think if it's a collection of stories in one book, I would call that an anthology. I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be. Um,
I
but
think I
you know,
think I think to play off of what Matt's saying here, like I think the modern terminology for an anthology is most typically like you have a central theme, setting, or situation that multiple people contribute to, right? So, like Matt had described his work on Deadbeats, that was multiple creative groups telling a musically inspired horror type of story within their parameters, right? And I think we do see a lot of those things. There was a successful one not too long ago called Off into the Sunset, which is all Western based. Again, short little pieces. It's all Western themed. Might have different genres therein afterward. Those strike me totally as anthologies. Um, I do think that there are some things that can kind of push the boundary of what a true anthology is, but even if it is something that has a definitive beginning, middle, and end, if sections of it are handled by different creative teams, different writers, different artists, etc., it is still an anthology, but maybe not necessarily to the truest extent. Um,
Because I
so
get confused on this, because I view Heavy
yeah,
Metal magazine as an anthology, because
of
that to
course,
me
good example.
is a great example. But then when I start looking at things, and I hate to throw my friend down it, but wow, I can't think of the book's name. He just funded, and Dan Schmidt worked on it, and Dan's coming on Wednesday, and I can't think of the name of the book, but it's the same writer with a bunch of different artists, and it's all dealing with, all the stories are spaced out like 300-400 years, but they're all dealing with how we got to a central point of his main comic. Or even something that Sean Keenan just did with XTC Monsters. Like, that is a bunch of different teams, and all those stories stand alone, but it's all leading into the central theme of XTC and that universe. And that's where I get confused now, is saying, okay, because you could have a main title and then you could have an anthology spinoff. But it
Sure.
gets tricky, and that's where I'm confused. And then I'm genuinely confused, because I'm saying to myself, well, when you're leading into a bigger world and you have something that is anthology and you have something that's not anthology, and then both play into the world, I just get confused on it. And I was just curious how you guys felt about it, because it's confusing to
Yeah.
me what is and what isn't, and then what becomes an anthology and then what isn't an anthology. Because I know what a main 6-issue arc is. I think everybody knows that. I know what a 3-parter
Sure.
is. I know what a double part is. I know what a one-shot is. But it just seems to me that everybody has like 15 different definitions for anthologies now.
Yeah, I mean, just like any type of art, I suppose it's open to one's interpretation, right? With our projects, when we really started to kind of put art art to words here a little bit, and it was like, Matt's idea to have each song or verse, if you will, done in a different art style. That is, the book itself is a series of homages, right? Like, we're paying homage to Dungeons and Dragons, to fantasy in general as a genre. We're telling the underdog story with a spin, right? And each song is done in a different art style. Like, and I mean, Frank Miller, Bill Watterson. We've got some Rob Liefeld. It's a little more of a parody than an homage. We've got Ryan Oatley. I'm pulling hard. Jack Kirby. I mean, come on. And one of the things that I realized while we started to do this was, like, it's kind of like we're paying an homage to anthologies, and to an extent, right? Because Matt's writing section to section changes to reflect that particular tale. Our Frank Miller inspired section is called "A Dame to Smite For." I'm sorry, "A Maiden to Smite For." Sorry, it's been a long day. And in that, his writing for that section is Miller-esque, a little tongue in cheek, but it's Miller-esque, and it's not like that anywhere else. And
So,
the art,
to even talk about that, because obviously you're doing
sure,
a bunch of different art, and so
sure.
what is that like to get to play in a bunch of different art styles and really get to bring that out, because it adds a different flavor to the book. And also,
Yep.
one of the things about anthologies, and I'm not anti-anthology, I want to make that crystal clear, everybody.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no.
There's certain things that won't connect. So, not to beat up Travis, and Travis knows that there's certain stories I'm just not a fan of in, Cthulhu Invades Oz. But there's other stories that I love, and that's all right. If you have 25 stories in an anthology, naturally people are going to gravitate towards different things. And I would imagine it's similar with this book and even this art style, because some people love Frank Miller, some people hate Frank Miller's artwork, especially depending
Yeah.
on the late Frank Miller. I mean, no offense to him, but DK3 was not his best work. I'm going to just say that.
No.
Sin City,
No.
though, phenomenal. So what
So
is that like for you to get to play with that, and also even for you, Matt, to get to write and get to change up the writing style? Because I would imagine that you have a favorite writing style and certain things you're less favorite on as well. Same thing with you, Peter, that you have probably a favorite art style that you like to do, and you probably got to do a little bit of both in this entire project.
you want to take it away, Matt?
Yeah.
That's right,
So for
ready?
me,
I mean, you guys can answer both. I mean,
Yeah, I know. We're trying to be polite to each other. That's what it
yeah.
is.
We like to play. It's like double dutch.
It's like tag team wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm getting the hot take. Um, so for me, I would say that again, like the Disney story was challenging because I had to write a song. For Frank Miller, it was a lot of like writing inner monologue, which was it's fun because I like, again, I'm huge on dialogue, so inner monologue is just another chance for me to get to write dialogue for this character. Other than that, I think I kind of got lucky with, like, the rest of them don't really have anything major writing wise. Like it's sort of, the rest of them are sort of normal. Those two are the ones that kind of stick out as the most challenging. I think with Frank Miller, like, he's really verbose in Sin City. Like, there's literally just his caption boxes will take up like a whole page. So I had to like really dig in. I was talking about like how the character was feeling at the time, like how, I mentioned that he should have eaten a banana, and then I like mentioned it again later on in the story, like he's feeling a little dizzy. What's this guy doing? What's this dude's name? Like, oh, I shouldn't, I should. He tries to remember someone's name and then realizes that like he completely didn't even hear it when they said it. It was just a lot of that, which is kind of, it's fun. It's a fun exercise. I don't envy anybody that tries to emulate Frank Miller on the daily basis, writing wise. But, and then again, for the Disney story, writing a musical number was the most impossible thing ever. I'm still not really that pleased with what I wrote, and that we were fortunate enough, Pete and I, to give you our secret origin as shortly as I possibly can. We share the same day job. We met at the day job. We became friends at the day job, etc. Fast forward to now, we have a friend of ours, a mutual coworker, who was in musical theater before she worked at our day job, and I actually want to run the lyrics past her to see if she has any suggestions or anything I could do to like make it better. Because again, like it was so hard, so taxing, that I'm just like anything I could do to make it that much better is I'll take it. Because geez, it's not fun. But
It's a great plug.
yeah,
It's a great
yeah.
plug. Art-wise, I learned my lessons. I think when I started this, I was working through sequential. Start on page one, go all the way through in order, and that kind of bit me in the backside at one point. So what I was doing was, as the story progresses, it starts in my style, and I flip in and out. Right, like I'll do 5 pages in my style, and then I'll do 8 pages in this style, and then 2 more in my style. And what happened was, while I was trying to harness my inner brooding Frank Miller, or the footless pouchdom that is Rob Liefeld, what happened was, I started to pick up good tricks, but I also picked up bad habits. So I had to basically, I took a like a breather, looked at my art, and realized, okay, my style's evolved for the better. Let's get rid of those bad habits. Let's keep rolling with the stuff that I picked up. I actually went back and redid the first 3 pages entirely, because I wanted it to blend better. Um,
And
doing
what
some,
is that like? Because I was just speaking with Global Frequency Studios. They do Mavericks,
yeah,
and they basically, and they sit open on the show, so this isn't a secret. They're not going to mind me telling this story, because you can go watch it. And that's a plug for me right there. But it's the idea that they wrote the entire thing and then they got with an editor and then they redid the entire pages and they did the book all over again because they thought the art could be better and they wanted to raise up the quality essentially.
sure.
And they sort of said the art was sort of shitty, for lack of a better word. They didn't use it that harsh, but they wound up redoing, I think, 66 or 80 pages of art. And so what is
Oh,
that
wow.
like for you? Because obviously one of the things that's helpful when you're in this circumstance is that you two have equity. You're not taking a page rate, from my understanding, versus
Correct.
and that changes the game a lot. When there's equity
Yeah.
versus page rate, it changes it. When you have a writer and an artist owning a project together, it changes it as well because redoing a page doesn't cost money the same way
Right.
as you were paying an artist. So, but even still,
Right. Well, I mean, it costs other things, right? It costs your, yeah, detriment to your home life, sobriety,
we're not
a
talking
million
about
other things.
direct capital is a good way to
Right.
put it.
Of
Versus
course.
sweat equity, enjoyment of something else, delay of the
Yeah.
launch of the project, or pulling a late nighter, or your Saturday gets ruined. Versus
Yeah.
that.
No, I get it. I get it. So, honestly, going back and doing those 3 pages wasn't so horrible. I think when I first looked at it, I was like, oh God, I got to redo 3 pages. But once I started it flowed pretty quick. I mean, the first page when I originally drew it took me like a day and a half. And then when I went back and redrew it again, it looks better. It's got brighter, more vibrant colors, and it took me 3.5 hours. So it's like, that a lot of artists will always say, practice makes perfect, draw, draw, draw. If you can't draw hands right, keep drawing hands until it clicks, that kind of stuff. And it's true. It really is true. By the time I went back and redid those 3 pages, we were already about 50 pages in. So it was like, and I'd been drawing literally every day for like 9 months straight. So it was like, all right, I'm going to go back. This will take me a little time. And then to my surprise, it really didn't take that long. Um, and I was happier with the result. And I think that's what's more important than anything is the quality. If as an artist, artists can be hard on themselves, right? and writers. I mean, I'm talking broadly. All types of artists can be hard on themselves. We're all our own worst critic at times, I think, and I'm no different. And I work in the quality assurance area for my day job, so I'm like especially hard on myself. So making sure that I felt that there was a nice flow, that the colors all blended, that there was a nice palette story going on, that the art was crisp, that I didn't forget something in the background of one panel that was in the background of the same panel prior. Making sure that all of that stuff is accounted for was absolutely crucial. So I don't regret going back and doing it. I, I I can't imagine what going back and doing 60 or so pages would be like. That's rough. That's really goddamn rough.
So in their defense, the editor basically turned the book from being like a book to an A+ book. So the gains were significant from my understanding, and that it was
Oh,
worth
okay.
it. So when you go,
Sure.
probably I mean I'm being generous when I say it was a B+ book. It wasn't a bad book, but they really hashed out and built out the concept, and they turned it from like night to day, and it's a better product because of it. And it's also the idea that sometimes you're producing something that isn't great, and you have the core, but you need to readdress the aesthetics. And
Totally.
I think with their book in particular, it's going to pay off really nicely, and they're funded very well in a lot of ways. And I got a feeling that it's a sleeper right now. And I'm not just saying that because they were on my show. It's a really interesting book. It's also one of the only mecha comics that have come out this year on the indie front. So if you're into
Nice.
giant robots fighting each other, that's a trade of its own. But
Wait, who is it? Who is it? Who is it?
it's done in manga. It's not done in the U.S. It's such a shame, And even in manga, it's not done that much. It's done in anime, and it's so bad that we don't get gigantic fighting robots. We need more of it in the U.S. I'm just saying.
Love that. Love that.
We also need a new animated Transformers movie that's like done in the '80s, but that style. But there's only so much I can ask for per the year's quote, I guess. But I do want to talk about my favorite topic beyond actually indie comics, and that's more the business side of things. And you guys are really new to Kickstarter. This is your first one. You're coming out with a 66 pager. I call it a mini graphic novel. Some people call it a graphic novel. Some people call it a one shot. And I think it's nicely bound. And so, what is the story of coming out this way? Because there is a big shift to producing more content now within mainstream comics. I mean, Zenescope, and I'm a big fan of Zenescope. They're doing 72 pagers now for a lot of stuff, and they're doing either one full 72 page story, or they're doing 36 pagers, or they're doing a part 1 and part 2, 72 pages. And so, what is the story of building this out versus doing it, And I know the story sort of lends itself to more of a graphic novel format, but even still doing it in like issues, or, sort of picking this number because it is interesting when this is going on.
For me, I mean, I can speak for myself here. I, as a collector, like I collect graphic novels. Like I try not to, or trades, as I call them. I try not to buy single issues unless it's something that I cannot miss every month. But again, like this story kind of lends itself to that. It's, I feel like, to be honest, like I feel like this is the direction that comics are heading in. Not to say that we'll ever lose floppies, but I think, down the road, I could speak for this year in general. Actually, graphic novel sales have never been higher than they were over COVID, because people needed stuff to do, so they were reading. They weren't going out places. They were like ordering books off Amazon, or ordering books from their local comic shop and having them ship them to their house. I think it's just, I do think in the future, like this is going to be the way that comics are delivered. And I again, like I happen to love it. I think it's the best way to read comics, is just to have that one book that you can sit down with and either read it right through, or pop a bookmark in it and come back to it. Floppies are great. They have their place. But I think, you know, there was no other way this book could have been made. I think this is the only
Yeah.
way we could have done it. It's
So
the format makes sense.
Did you also feel that there's also where the future of comics, because I'm super curious, and I tend to be a comic book investor, and I tend to be on that side. So I buy and sell a lot of comics. I deal with merchandise that is $20, and I deal with merchandise that is $1,000, and everywhere in between. And so obviously, one of the things that's going on in our world, I guess, and all the people on Facebook is saying, what is the perfect number for a book? And so, because this is not a full 144-page graphic novel, but it's also not a 24-pager, it's not a 36-pager, it's somewhere in between. And so what was that number? And I know there's some pinups and other stuff that sort of brings it up more to 80 pages.
Right.
But even finding that right number, because obviously the more pages you add, the more expensive it is to print. My entire sponsor, guys, is a printing company. Okay?
We're using your sponsor for our printing.
I know their prices. I also know printing is going to get more expensive in the next 2-3 months. It's coming. It's coming. And I know it. Shipping delays are coming too, and everything's about to get pricey. So God help us. And I know firsthand that there's been, since I started my sponsorship, printing has increased by about $500 across the board.
Wow. We're actually using your sponsor for our book. So
they print nice. They print nice. They do a good job.
Yeah. We got the sampler kit. It's looks good and easy website to use, right? Like so simple. I love it. Really made the math simple for us. To give my answer to that. So I prefer to buy nowadays in graphic novel format because when I want to sit and read, I'm an impatient guy, right? Like that's as an artist, I like to do until I'm done with my picture. When I sit and read, I like to sit and read until I'm done, and I can't really wait month to month. I do go back and collect like older books though, right? So like I'm that guy that's at the flea market at 6:30 in the morning with half a cup of coffee down the front of him because he's not even awake enough to drink it, looking for dudes who like emptied out like their grandmother's house and don't know what they have on the table. If the guy's got adequate pricing and everything's bagged and boarded, I'm not even going to waste my time with that guy, right? Because I know I'm not going to get a deal. I'm looking for the guy who's selling like Fantastic Four 53 for $6 on a folding table, right? Like that's what I'm looking for. And I think that the way that comics are kind of evolving, like it's leaning more toward trade and digital, right? Like I'm not personally a fan of digital. I like the feel, but I try to think like a generation or two from now, right? Like I have 3 kids and they're all into comic books and they're more inclined to read digital because it's accessible.
For me, digital is the cheapest thing. Comixology is $6.37 a month, and when I'm reading 50 comics a month, and I'm just on my iPad, so I got an iPad last year for Christmas, and it's the greatest thing I've ever gotten because I can do so much now. I didn't know what I was missing. I didn't know what I was missing until I got it. Yeah. And for $6.37, I could read all of Sonic the Hedgehog. I could read things that I don't want to go out and buy, and that I'm reading a bunch of WWE comics. There's legitly like 13 volumes of that, and in order for me to buy it, I don't own it, but what I do is that I'm borrowing it from Comixology essentially, and then when I'm done, I return it, and I legitimately am saving myself hundreds, if not thousands of dollars because I'm now reading all this stuff that I don't want to buy and that a library doesn't have per se.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm a digital reader, but I'm also a variant collector. And that's where it gets tricky is that a lot of what I'm buying now is I'm looking for that 1 in 50 book that is super rare, even on Kickstarter. That's like a special foil cover that, because I want to look at it. And then I'm anticipating more as a spec play that somebody's going to want it in the future. And I've done very well in that market. And, I just sold a 75 print run for 125 that I'm shipping out tomorrow. And so, when I paid a lot less for it, than that. So, that I see it very. I do think it's going trade to digital, but I also think that the collector's market on certain things is always going to be there, and variants are always going to be there. And there is what I think is going to be, because there are companies. Zenoscope is one of those companies that it's legitimately built on the back of variants right now, and they're slaying it and killing it, and they're doing phenomenal with it. And
Yeah,
so,
and when we started putting together the book, it was like, I think originally we actually had like a bigger number for pages, and then it hit as we were working through it, like it very organically reached a point where it was like, okay, this is a stopping point right here, because if we go beyond this, we're going to have to go really beyond it, right? And we don't want to make it like this whole omnibus size thing. We want to tell a story, and it's very organic. And to go back in afterward and to like fill it out seemed unnecessary. So the book itself being 66 pages, ultimately it's like 80, maybe 82, with all the back matter, some super fun back matter at that. I think it's it's a nice novella size, right? Where it's not going to be that hulking, invincible ultimate collection volume one, but it's also it's not
and,
going to be light grade.
and even to
So
go further into this, in which that your price point and also a 66-page book, if you go to 100 pages, the price point has to change. And
sure,
when you're not
sure,
taking page rates, and that's not where the factor, just the raw materials of printing,
yeah,
it just increases. I know this because if you're printing a 200-page book with Mixum, it's different than if you're printing a 50-page book.
yeah,
Just logically, it's just different pricing, and so you're keeping it relatively cheap. I think it's 20 for both physical and digital, and
yep,
it's the idea that you're keeping it relatively affordable. And that's the other thing. I don't know if that was a factor in building it out, but it's also the idea that saying, hey, how do we keep a project affordable so that people can afford it? Because unfortunately, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, there's certain Kickstarters where you go up to $100 and that's the cheapest starting point. I'm priced out. My
yeah,
perfect number on Kickstarter, and I don't know what yours is 20 or 25. That is a perfect price point for me.
yeah,
$30 maybe, but is a little bit of a stretch. But once you hit 40, $50, I'm out of the marketplace on it because it doesn't make sense for me anymore because I'm sort of believing in you, and that's a big leap of faith at $50 for me. And so I
yeah.
like the fact that it's cheap in the rewards. And so what went into that? Because I'm super curious about that.
I mean, it was a lot of, again, like keeping it modest. Like our goal needed to be modest. The tiers needed to be modest because this is our first Kickstarter, not the first one that we've funded. I mean, or contributed to, but like the first one that we are actually running. So we wanted to keep it modest so that we had a better chance at funding, and obviously we did. We funded uh, what like a little over a week through the campaign. We
Yeah.
reached funding. So we wanted to hit that sweet spot, and also, but on top of that, you do need those higher tiers. Like you need them. It's just a better way, to bring people in and get them to spend a little extra, because we had plenty of people that like friends and family that were like, oh, I want to give more than I want more than just the book, but I don't want any of the extra stuff. Can I tip you guys more? And you could do that, but like you do need those like we have art tiers. We have a couple of art tiers. We have one like original like pen and ink 5x7 pen and ink drawing of a random character from the book. And then we have a couple geared towards the tabletop role playing crowd, whether it's like a digital portrait of your character, or we went as far as to do an 11x17 canvas print of your role playing game character. And those like that's our highest tier, that 11x17. And I think Pete, did we sell out of those, or we have one left?
Yeah. We sold out.
Yeah. So, and
sold out.
that's our highest tier. It's the highest price point. It made the most sense, dollar wise, and it really, honestly, like if we didn't have those tiers, like, it would have been a struggle, but we would
Well,
have made it still, but it helped.
Yeah, and right there, I mean, like the biggest tier that we offered was $200. We capped it at 5 backers. That's $1,000. Our funding goal originally was $5,000. So a fifth of all funding came from 5 people. So, which is awesome.
It's
That's
80-20.
fantastic.
It's 80-20 for you.
Yeah, totally. I do like, Kickstarter math is not fun math, right? Like it's all hypothetical, it's all theoretical. Your math is only as good as the number of backers that you correctly estimate are going to support each individual tier at the different levels you set across all of your production expenses, which is crazy math, honestly, because it's like you almost like what we did. We did doomsday methodology, right? Where it's like, okay, in a perfect world, it's this and this and then this.
Yeah, what's going on with Kickstarter? It's very interesting because the people are just saying, look, I just need to get across the border on my printing, and I might even lose money on the printing, but they need to sort of either pay themselves back or they need to get 80% across because they know they're going to make their money back at a con, or that, when they do the con circuit. And obviously 2020 was not the year for that, and even 2021 is not the year for that. But that's been a very previous model, saying I just need to be 80%, but that doesn't mean you need to be 80% funded. It means that your goal is 80% of what you need to break even in a lot of ways.
Right.
Because you're going to make your money on the back end. Or what's now happening is that places like Scout, Behemoth, Second Sight Publishing, and a few others are now saying, look, we want your book, but we don't want to pay you a page rate, and we'll be your distribution, which is also a different business model completely. Or people are saying, look, we're just going to do digital first. And that's coming because, well, if you lower your costs significantly and you don't have a physical product, then all you have to do is do a digital product. That's where it's going. And so that's really interesting, in which that Kickstarter math is not fun. And it's not an easy thing to do.
No.
And also what you want to have is you want to have a goal that actually makes sense. And then obviously 7%. And it's just, I know because I speak to enough people on Kickstarter that I understand the entire dilemma of it, of what it is, and then also things happen, and then canceled pledges, and a variety of other stuff. And also one of the things that I like that you did, and I don't know how it did for you, but you also had a tier for shop owners. Because obviously I'm getting into that space. I have an eBay store. I actually just picked up a tier from somebody else, and I'm still testing it. But that's something that is really big right now, where I think a lot of stores have come to the conclusion, are starting to realize they can't rely on Marvel, DC, and the rest of those big guys anymore, because in the middle of COVID, they shut down, they changed their business model. Those deals aren't as lucrative as they used to be with Diamond.
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen with Diamond? And when people are getting really sick of Marvel, DC, parts of Image, parts of IDW, Dynamite, I could tell you Titan in December is going to be probably one of the hottest companies. They got a book coming out, and it's going to blow everybody away, and it's going to start in November on Netflix. I'm speaking in code. And it's just saying. But where do you foresee all of this going? With Kickstarter and comics and everything that's happening.
So interestingly, just to mirror some of the things that you just said here. So my local comic book shop is in Newtown, Connecticut. It's called Cave Comics. Love the place. I've been going there for damn near 30 years, right?
Cave Comics. It's called. Describe the building to me, because I might know what it looks like, because I'm in Bethel.
Oh, you are? Oh, really? All right. So it's a red building along the side of train tracks. It's right down the hill from like where the flagpole is in the center of town.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's a
it's
lot of
Cave
comics
Comics, right?
in there, and it's is Cave Comics the one that have like the dogs as their mascots?
Yes. Well, they used to. They switched owners, but yes, they
And,
used
and,
to.
and
They used to have the
sometimes the dogs are in there, right?
yeah, a Kirby and Electra.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was part of
I
the
know that. I
original.
know where it is. I know where that is.
So the place is called Cave Comics, right? Obviously, there's some Bat Cave, you know, stuff there. You go inside. The walls are all lined with Batman commissions. You've got like Neil Adams Batman in there. You've got all these different artists renditions of Batman all over the wall. Okay. And the other day I saw on like their Facebook page that they were shorted their DC comics. They didn't have DC comics. Like how sad is that? How sad is that? A place that is, modeled itself in homage to Batman is not capable of getting their DC comics. That's kind of messed up. And I think that the way that everything is going to work is I think it's going to become a little bit more Mad Maxian, right? Where we're going to get, Wednesdays are no longer going to be comic book days at some point. You're going to get your Marvel's going to land on a Tuesday, your DC's going to come on a Thursday, maybe Image still stays on Wednesdays, and it's going to be scattered, which is going to throw off, I think, a lot of local business models. Wednesdays are big days for them. Maybe Thursdays is kind of like the fallout day, if to some degree. Weekends is probably more for special events and trying to, maybe parents coming in with kids that are normally otherwise in school. And you're going to see that all go into flux. And that's going to hurt them, I think. People coming in, hey, do you have the new issue of Spider-Man? Oh, wait, no, that comes out 2 days from now. Sorry, you missed it.
Do you think though, because I'm a product, and this is where I'm at, is that I've been ordering comics from Midtown Comics for the last 10 years just online. Because getting to a comic shop is a pain for me. I have a million things going on in my personal life. I was in college and I wasn't, going to go hop on a bus, but I didn't have a car, go find a comic shop where I was at, and then do that every Wednesday and then open up a pull list, and it was just shipped to me. And COVID was great because everything was shipped to me. It was easy. I didn't have to worry about anything, and it's also cheaper. And as much as I would love to support local business, I think at a certain point, I have to say as an individual, look, I can buy 10 comics or 5 comics, and it gets complicated. Not to mention that there are books like I think it's Gun Honey that the shop I went to 3 weeks ago did not have that as an option for a pull list. And so that's the other thing too, is that certain things that are just not available because certain shops can't make money with it, which I get because there's not enough interest. And so I don't foresee that being a problem for me because I get it shipped to me all monthly, and I think more people are going to be like me.
Yeah, right. But for the local comic shops, I think the smaller ones, right? Like Midtown Comics is not hurting, right? Like they're not. Let's be real about that. But a small place,
I
a
think
small place on the street, like
my, 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 my
they're
point
gonna
my
go.
point is that I think a bunch of these businesses have to move over into a digital environment. And
Sure,
I think comics have to go there too. And I think Kickstarter has done that for indies, where the fact and I'm going to say this openly, there's a million projects, and I think I've backed this year about 20 projects on Kickstarter. That wouldn't have happened if it weren't for COVID, and that I clearly have become a client, and they're from all over the world. I mean, I have books coming in from Canada and from I have a book coming in from Singapore. I'm going to have a book coming in from Australia. And it's because they've now entered a digital environment. I think that's the key. And I don't mean digital as in reading it on my iPad or on a PDF file. I mean that, hey, you're marketing to me on a digital level. And now you're winning me over because you could ship anywhere in the world. And so I think that's the new model.
I know what you're saying. Like, I get what you're saying. It's convenience, right? I don't think brick and mortar shops are going to go anywhere. I think the right ones will stick around. The ones that cater to a broader audience. The ones that don't necessarily carry just Marvel and DC. The ones that don't necessarily just do comics. They'll branch out to other merchandise, or they'll do events at the store. Like they make it more of a community experience than anything else. Those shops will not go anywhere. The shops, and I've been to plenty of them. The shops that only sell Marvel and DC, don't branch out into the indies, that don't branch out into their community, or do this other stuff. Those shops will go away. And don't get me wrong, I hope no shops ever go away, but it's just the nature of the beast.
Right.
But I don't think comic shops will go anywhere. But I do think that, to your point, like, we're going to get more digital spaces. That is why Kickstarter did amazing over the last year during COVID, because of that reason. Because there were whole companies that told their artists to put their pencils down and not work on books because they couldn't afford to pay them. So artists had to find other means to produce their work. So they went to Kickstarter to fund their self-published projects, and that's why the Kickstarter did insane over that year. I think again, there is a space for it, but I think comic shops as a whole, they're going to stick around for a while. Even if, let's say, a couple years in the future, even if they do completely, let's say they get away from floppies altogether, they'll just be shops that sell back issues and trades. Like they'll adapt. The right ones will adapt. The wrong ones will not.
And also, what's coming down the pike, and if you've been in a Barnes and Noble, Barnes and Noble has all these exclusive graphic novel covers, and that's becoming a whole new thing where they're offering prints in their graphic novels, and they're offering alternative covers, and people are really liking that. And I know Barnes and Noble's not the only one who's doing it, and I think that's also a big market that, if we switch over to graphic novels, which is, I'm going to be the first to say that I think it's going to increase. I don't know if it's going to completely go all the way, and I don't think it'll ever go all the way. But obviously, that's a whole different market, because certain books are worth real money now. Because once Marvel stop printing a certain book and it doesn't go into reprint, that book is now not a $20 book. That book is now a $40, $50 book. And while you're not going to get it graded, books do appreciate in value, especially the right story. So that's a whole different side of comic book investing. I don't touch it. I don't know much about it because I don't play in that sector, because it's confusing to me. I tend to deal with floppies, but it's so interesting. And speaking about books, one of your stretch goals is turning the softcover into a hardcover. And so what is that like? Because I've had a debate in my Facebook group where I said, hey, what's the best stretch goal that you could have out there? And somebody said, oh, getting the next issue funded, or upgrading, to a hardcover.
So we like Matt wanted to keep the entire campaign humble and modest, and all of our math reflected that. When we hit funding, I think it was 9 days. When we hit funding, it was like, okay, well, crap, we've got another 23 actually days left of this. We should consider a stretch goal. Before, we didn't really want to throw it out there, right? Like our goal is funding. We don't have the stickers, we don't have the buttons, we don't really, we're not doing really anything on a merch level, that I think a lot of people, get wrapped up in with their projects. We wanted to just keep it simple. And we were very confident that we could produce a very nice, low target with a softcover trade, right? Or graphic novel. And then when we realized, like, okay, let's do the math again. Let's see where that theoretical spreadsheet of doom now falls in with what our backers are getting, where we're shipping, etc. And when we looked at it, we were like, okay, well, we only really need to clear another $1,200 to hit hardcovers, and to have it make sense where we're not out of pocket for anything. So let's do it. Matt and our payday here is getting the story out. That's it. That's it. And as it stands right now, we're going to do that. So we're getting paid when people start reading our book. So spiritually, emotionally.
But it's also the idea that once you get something out there and it's printed and then you start going to cons, and then you're also building a readership. And it's the idea that I don't know if you're building a company or just the project, or if the company's coming second, or the entire structure. But obviously, if you want to come back for a second project or a sequel or a
Yeah.
volume two, companies sometimes need to lose money. I mean, I think both of you are wrestling fans. I'm sure you know this, but AEW hasn't made a profit yet. Now,
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
the thing is that if AEW wants to stick around for 20 years, if you don't make a profit for your first 2.5 years in wrestling, nobody cares, because you're building your audience, you're laying the infrastructure. In this show that I started, 2 years ago, and then my other show, I hopefully in 4 months will actually make a profit. In the first time in almost 2.5 years, essentially, of working on it. But that's okay, because I'm planning to stick around for another 20. So it's okay not if you're building your readership or cultivating an audience. And I also like the fact that it's going to be a hardcover if you reach that goal, because that changes. And that's also a benefit to everybody. It's not just like, oh, it's something like a keychain where some people might like it. Everybody loves a hardcover book.
Right. Exactly. And it's the same price, right? Like if you go to any comic book shop and you have the exact same graphic novel in your hand, one's a hardcover, one's a soft cover, there's a price difference. And here there isn't. Just help us get through our stretch goal, and everybody gets a hardcover.
And I'm going to give you a chance to sell that again in 1 second. But I do want to talk about COVID. Obviously, I think both of you are in the tri-state area. I think Connecticut's the tri-state area, right? I have to be careful because I used to live in D.C. So very, very different. D.C.'s the power of the world right there. It's the center of the world as far as power. And if you don't think it is, go down to D.C. and work in government, and you'll understand why. But anyhow, I digress right there. Obviously, I'm back in Connecticut now, and I've been back for about 10 months. And where do you think, obviously New York Comic Con is hitting, I think Thursday. I don't know if the two of you are going. I personally am sitting and waiting to see how everything plays out next year. And I'm curious, where do you think, cons are going? Where do you think COVID's going as far as comics? And what changes do you think are going to be made in the comic world? Because I don't think, we're going to be going back to normal so quickly. And I don't think, we're going back to what it looked like 3 years ago also so quickly, even after we get a year or 2 or 3 years past COVID.
I mean, I don't know. So Pete and I were supposed to go this weekend to New York, and it was kind of like a last minute decision to not go. I've been debating it the entire time since we started talking about it. I think.
So I can give my viewpoint on it. That'll help.
Sure.
So my whole thing, and this is where I'm curious about, is, so I'm vaccinated and I have a health issue. So if I get COVID, it's just going to suck for me. Even if I'm vaccinated, if I don't get hospitalized, it's going to be worse for me. So I'm at risk. So I made a personal decision, on top of the fact that right now, economically, I have some stuff coming up, and I don't feel like going to a con only having $100 in my wallet, paying for an expensive ticket, be around people, and be, even if they're going to crowd control and have sanitation and a variety of other stuff. Well, God forbid an outbreak happens, I'm going to have less money. Everybody's going to be hyped up. I think dealers are going to be very aggressive in selling because they've been, thinking, I don't think there's good deals for me to go find a book, wait 4 months, and then flip it, because there's still massive inflation out there. And across the board, I just think that it's not going to be a fair market, and it's not going to be a safe market for me. And I don't think that I'm going to benefit. And right now, I can get 95% of what I want off the internet that I could get at New York Comic Con without having to risk my life or spend an additional $200 for a ticket and parking in New York City.
Yeah,
there was a smaller show back in August here in Connecticut called Terrificon, and that show, from everything I saw, it looked like it was nice, tight. Well, tight's the wrong word. Spacious, but well run, well organized, and very, very, in check with some guidelines. And that was kind of before things, really. I think, well, maybe we're a little worse now. And New York Comic Con, I don't know how you could possibly in the Javits Center wrangle 70 to 100,000 people in a way that keeps them socially distanced. It's impossible.
I went to Anime NYC a few years ago, the first one, and I spoke, and that was a tight con. And I was very reserved because I was doing a panel. I did 2 panels back to back, had a blast. And it was tight. And I've been to New York Comic Con once, and it's a tight con. It is a crazy con. It's a very aggressive convention. And I don't foresee, especially with comic investors and everybody's trying to get a deal and everybody's trying to get stuff graded, I just don't foresee, it doing well. And also with like celebrity photos and all that stuff, like you're going to put a bar between me and John Cena when I'm dropping $120. Fuck no, I'm not spending $120. I'm not saying I want to like touch somebody's face and lick their face. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I expect it to be a human interaction. I expect not to be in a mask when I'm taking the photo, and I expect it to be that way, and it's not going to be run that way. And
not at all, not at all. And on top of that too, it's like there's only so much ventilation. There's only so much a ventilation system can do for 100,000 people. Like that's it. Masks are all well and good, but not everybody's going to wear masks. People are going to slip them down and catch a breather. Who's going to enforce that? So I think the future of cons is, and this is why over the last week, we really decided like we're not going to go this year, and it was I think smaller cons that are more easily regulated for safety. I think you're going to see more of those over the next couple of years, maybe. And there's I think where we all live in the tri-state area, right? We're lucky enough that there's already a bunch of those already, and I think they're just kind of holding off, waiting till the next season for the most part. And I think that's going to become the new lay of the land. These grandiose big cons, as fun as they've been in the past, I think you're going to start to see people gravitate to smaller venues.
It's also, I've had more interaction with one-on-one time with comic people at a smaller con. When 500 people, and I get to speak to Scott Lobdell, who was writing the Teen Titans, for 30 minutes, and because nobody's behind me, and we're just talking about art, and we're talking about life, and we're talking about certain things, and it's almost like a one-on-one interview without the interview, and you're just speaking. I think that's also a change as well. And it's also the difference between $100 ticket and a $20 ticket. It's also the difference where, I just think, people tend to also, when there's only like 500 people at a con, it's pretty spacious, that's how I view it. And also, I'm a business and I go panel-wise, and I'm trying to use it as an organic funnel. And I've never gotten business out of a con. And so that's the other thing, too, for me, is that I might get a free badge giving a panel, but I've never, gotten business out of it. And then also, I'm even looking at some of the panels this year at New York Comic Con. I'm like, there's some stuff lacking. there's some stuff lacking.
Well, there's a lot lacking, right? No Marvel, no DC, no Midtown Comics. Like that's, it's a weird year. It's a weird year for the con for sure.
And so I'm just waiting to see how it all goes. So on that note, though, obviously, I want to give you guys an opportunity to self-promote. So where can people back the Kickstarter? Obviously, now that you're not going to New York Comic Con, this is the way to get the book. And you have a few days left. I think you have 5 days left. Obviously, I think, what are you, like 800 or like $1,200 away from this hardcover book for everybody?
Like a little less than 800. Yeah, about 700 away from the stretch goal.
So obviously, that's what, how many books? 35, if my math is correct.
Yeah, about that. And there's some big tiers open too. So if people like art,
So obviously,
I wanna
where
back
can people
those.
back the Kickstarter? Where can people obviously find both of you on, Instagram, Facebook pages, email lists, Twitter, all that stuff, because that stuff is super important at this point.
Yep. So you can back the Kickstarter at just Google the Bardic versus Kickstarter or go to tbvkickstarter.com. Um, that'll take you right to the Kickstarter page. For me, you can find me pretty much everywhere online. We're talking Facebook, MySpace, LinkedIn, Twitter, Friendster, LiveJournal, Tumblr,
And all that's new,
Match.com.
right? All that's new because
Yep.
of what happened yesterday, right? You brought back MySpace, right?
Yep. So you can find me at all those places, every social media on the face of the planet Earth. My handle is at MattManBegins.
Awesome.
That's a great handle right there. That's a
Thank you. Thank you.
fantastic handle.
It's the best. You can't compete with that. All right. So it's I am on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and that's pretty much it. As PAC, PAC illustration. If you like Tupac, just remember PAC is spelled the same way here. PAC illustration.
And so obviously, and I've been saying it, is that you have to back indie. And what that means is obviously backing Kickstarters, following people's Kickstarters, and then going beyond that, sharing that you actually back the Kickstarter. Because unfortunately, Facebook, minus yesterday, we were all in Facebook jail yesterday. And then apparently, if you go whistleblowing and testify before Congress, witness tampering has a new definition, apparently, according to Facebook now. But
Nice.
kidding aside right there, Facebook's algorithm is not what it used to be. And so things that when you share it, obviously Facebook shows it to more people. And there's been plenty of projects where I shared it out and somebody's like, I didn't even know this existed. How did I not see this for 20 days? And so that's why it's so important to tweet out when you back a Kickstarter. Share it on Facebook. Share it to pages. Share it to your personal Facebook page. Share it multiple times, because guess what? A variety of people who have not seen it will see it, and they might just be looking for it. And it's super important. And then even going beyond that, you should be following people on social media as well. It's free. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter is free. I get Tumblr, MySpace, those things are sort of a little bit in the past, but the main three, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, are free, and you should be following your favorite creators and people who are doing things on Kickstarter, because that's where you're going to find out stuff first. So obviously,
we're like pointing at each other.
I am so confused now. I am so confused.
That's what we do, man.
Need to go to sleep now and have another interview in 40 minutes. But anyway, I digress. And I will say this for myself. Obviously, I'm an indie content creator. I have a few projects. I have something dropping on November 1st. I will probably be talking about that in the upcoming weeks. It's very exciting what's about to happen with me. But in the meanwhile, I do have Buy Me a Coffee. And producing a podcast, 185 episodes is what it's looking like this year. I did 90 last year. Season 3 is happening one way or another. And I do appreciate support. And I also appreciate people liking the Facebook page. Obviously, it's Pop Anime Comics, the YouTube page. Super helpful to subscribe on YouTube. Obviously, I'm on Twitch. I'm in Facebook groups. You name it, definitely checking that out, because that goes a long way. And also just sharing it out, because that is really what I appreciate the most, is when people share out interviews, and you never know who's watching. So on that note, I'm going to give both of you the final word.
Pete?
In darkest day, in blackest night, wash your goddamn hands.
Yeah, and back to the Bardic Verses on Kickstarter, or I will find you.
He will. He will find you. It won't be pretty, but it will be pretty.
Well, that's a wrap right there.